Welcome to South Shore Scoop. My name is Eileen McIntyre. I am a board member of the Hingham Land Conservation Trust. Today, I am here to introduce to you the first recipients of the Goodrich Environmental Research Grant. This annual grant program was launched as part of the 2022 50th anniversary year of the Hingham Land Conservation Trust. The grant program honors the legacy of Sally Goodrich, who founded the trust and died in 2020. With me today are Andrew Hultin, administrator of the Weymouth Conservation Commission, and Lisey Good, founder and board member of the nonprofit organization Wild Cohasset. Andrew, Lisey, and the organizations they represent are the recently announced recipients of the inaugural year Goodrich Grants. Welcome, Andrew and Lisey.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about the two projects that the Goodrich Grants will help fund. We'll begin with the work planned by the Weymouth Conservation Commission. Andrew, maybe you could first describe the context for this project. I know it's part of a number of things that Weymouth is doing to improve local rivers.
Yeah, certainly. So this project kind of builds off some ongoing work to improve the Old Swamp River, which is a tributary to the Whitman's Pond in Weymouth. It's a perennial river that runs from approximately its headwaters start at the Naval Air Station, which is now Union Point, runs through Rockland, a little bit of Hingham, and into Weymouth. It actually goes between the highway medium for quite a stretch before discharging into Whitman's Pond. And 2 years ago, we applied to the Division of Ecological Restoration, they're a state agency under the Fish and Wildlife Department, for a grant to remove a defunct dam on the Old Swamp River called the Snup. And this was an infrastructure project that was put in the late 70s that was meant to divert river water into a series of detention basins before bringing it back into the river and into Whitman's Pond, and it was meant to reduce nutrient inputs into Whitman's Pond. But the structure never functioned as it was intended, and the dam is impacting the river. It's causing about 500 feet of built up sediments behind the dam, and it's a barrier to fish passage. So we have herring that use that river for spawning, and we have a population of brook trout, and that dam is presumably impacting both of those. So we have that work underway. We recently got another $200,000 grant from the state now to finalize our design for that project, and hopefully we'll be implementing that project sometime next year. Part of that project, our goal was to study brook trout in the Old Swamp River, which historically have been noted to occur there. As recently as 2019, the state did a survey. They come out and they electroshock the stream, which is not as invasive as it sounds, but it does involve briefly electrocuting the water, and the fish will float up and be stunned for a moment or two. Back in 2009, they found good populations of brook trout and brown trout. We did it again this summer as part of this project with the state, and we didn't find any brook trout.
And you were just doing this by having volunteers or staff go out and look for them visually?
Yeah, so this was conservation staff and a staff from Division of Fish and Game who came out and did the actual electroshocking of the water. We did it in August, and as you probably remember, the state was in a pretty bad drought at that time. And the stretches that we were surveying were closer to the pond, not so much near the headwaters. And there was very little flow, very low waters, and we just didn't find any trout. And it kind of begged the question of, well, are they still here? Where are they? Do they migrate to colder groundwater inputs during the summer and kind of seek refuge there? So we want to just understand more about these fish, because it's significant, because there aren't too many cold water fish resources in this area of the state. Many cold water streams have been degraded over time due to development, nutrient inputs from runoff, pollution, things of that nature, have just made it unsuitable habitat. So there's very few of these in the greater Boston area. Weymouth has one, I believe. Hingham has one on the Plymouth River. That's about it for the inner greater Boston area. So it's pretty significant if this population does still exist.
So now you're planning a different approach using some fairly new science to try and determine if, in fact, there are brook trout in this river, right?
Yep. So the whole river is several miles in length. So to do traditional survey methods can be quite an undertaking. And there's only about one, I think there's one staff person for the state that does this for the whole state. We're out here in Eastern Mass where there aren't too many of these resources. So most of their efforts are focused on the western part of the state, and they just don't have the resources to fully survey the river. So we learned about eDNA recently through I think some lecture series, and it's a new thing that involves taking a sample of water from a particular water body, and you can test that sample of water for DNA from a particular species just by means of shedding DNA by being in that environment. And it's pretty precise, and I believe they're using it on the Jones River down in Kingston pretty successfully. I think it has something to do with them understanding the herring run there. But you can target a very specific species and look for the DNA presence of that species within a water body. So,
and then there are certain laboratories that have the know-how to analyze these samples that you take.
Yep. There aren't many. We're using UMass Maine. They do a lot of that work up in the state, so these samples do have to be shipped up there, and there's some pretty specific protocols for how you can handle these water samples and get them up there to the laboratory. But our plan is to sample at about 7 different locations where the river intersects roads across its length from Rockland through Weymouth. So we're hoping that if we can detect a DNA presence at some of those species, we might be able to kind of get an idea of what section of the river they might be using based on where we found that sample.
And you'll do some of the sampling at different times of year as well?
Yeah, yep. So we're planning for a spring and a fall sampling.
Terrific. Well, we love this project because both of its importance to this cold water resource, but also the interesting use of technology here for environmental benefits. So thanks so much, Andrew, for sharing that. Lisey, can you tell us a bit about Wild Cohasset? I know you haven't been around forever, but you've done some really terrific projects. So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, we started about 10 years ago, and it really came out of learning more about invasive plants and how dangerous they were to our local ecosystem, how much they were harming native plants. And that's our mission, is to help native plants and all of the creatures that rely on them, that evolved together with them and therefore really need them for survival. So we started by targeting one particular bad plant, garlic mustard, which was really, really a problem in our town in Cohasset. We used mainly volunteers. And as we recognized the gravity of the problem and that we could really do something about it, we got more and more involved in recruiting more volunteers, having more organized projects to sort of weed, to teach people. And then the next evolution was to try to add back some of the plants that we're looking to help, add back some of the native plants to help wildlife.
And you've done some specific projects like that.
Exactly. We've had a lot of success with educating, organizing volunteers, removing invasive plants. There are probably 4 or 5 that we really target. And then we did our first ever garden for wildlife, pollinator garden that we installed in Scituate last year. It's been really successful. It was really wonderful. And we're sort of using that as the model for this project.
And you did that in a fairly visible area, I think, near the animal?
Well, it's the Scituate Animal Shelter. It's on the grounds of the Scituate Animal Shelter, and they have a large kind of campus. So it's not really necessarily a public spot, but it's one where about 200 volunteers walk by all the time. And we have signage with QR codes that they can just use their phone to find out what the plants are and why each of those individual plants are there. And our tracking shows that over about 300 people have used that to learn more about the plants. Hopefully are planting them at home themselves.
Right. And this grant is going to help you do a larger project along those lines.
Exactly.
So tell us about that.
This grant will help us do a pollinator meadow in Cohasset. We're really excited about it because it will not only provide habitat for wildlife. It will serve as an educational tool. It's going to be in a very visible spot that both recreational, like hikers and dog walkers use. And it's also going to be very close to sort of a sidewalk that people, kids walk by on their way to school. And we feel the same kind of educational tool, permanent signage, will really, it's not just going to help the individual creatures that live in that area. It's going to hopefully educate a lot of people about the importance of why we've done what we've done.
And are you at liberty to say where the garden is going
to be?
Yeah,
it's still in the final planning stages with the town. We received this grant together with the Open Space Committee of Cohasset, so we're working with them. But I just literally now came from staking out the spot that we're hoping for, and it looks like it will be. It's in Wheelwright Park in Cohasset.
And Wheelwright Park, I know there's one entrance right from Main Street, and it's large.
This is near the Main Street entrance, exactly. And part of what we're doing, and we're excited to learn more, is we're installing some native plants as kind of a border, as a barrier. And we're hoping that not only that they'll spread, but that these particular plants, it's called golden ragwort, they're wonderful for pollinators, wonderful for birds. There's been some anecdotal evidence that they can hold their own against garlic mustard, prevent garlic mustard from marching into those woods. And that's our hope. We're going to have sort of a border of them and watch and see what that does to help our efforts of keeping that particular plant out of it.
I think I'll have to get some of those plants myself, because garlic mustard is the bane of my existence on our own property. So you mentioned using volunteers in the past.
Yes.
Talk more about how volunteers are likely to be involved in this project.
Volunteers have been so important to us. We couldn't do what we did. We started on, we didn't have a budget. We had nothing. And so we really relied on volunteers. And we've got a lot of people that are already interested in helping with this project. For example, the Boy Scouts, the local troop in Cohasset, spends a lot of time in Wheelwright Park. They actually have a little camp that I believe they own. And so they've helped us weed in this very spot in the past. We have a regular core of volunteers that are just, wildlife lovers or gardeners or people that are interested in the subject, birders. And we reach out, we have National Honor Society students who get community service credits for working with us. So we really have a network. And it will be very important in the beginning, installing the plants, preparing the area, and watering that first summer to really make sure the plants are established. And, and then after that, weeding and keeping out the bad things from the meadow.
Well, terrific. Well, we look forward to seeing this project progress. And on behalf of the Land Trust, congratulations to both of you, Andrew and Lisey, and your organizations. That you found out about our new grant. The word is just spreading. We are doing our best to get the word out, but your applications were so intriguing and exactly what Sally Goodrich would have wanted to see. She really started this grant program with a bequest from her will, and we added to that, but this is the kind of project that I think would just warm her heart. So thank you both for doing so much for the environment on the South Shore. The Hingham Land Conservation Trust looks forward to sharing both the news of your projects and to seeing what other projects might emerge in the future. So the Goodrich Environmental Research Grant Program is an annual program. We'll be accepting more applications as we get towards the fall this year. And you can find all about it on the Hingham Land Conservation Trust website, which is hinghamlandtrust.org. And there is a tab that says grants, and that's where you'll find the Goodrich grant information. So we encourage all of you to not only hear more as we spread the news about what's happening with these projects, but identify projects that your organization may want to apply for grant money for in the future. So thank you both, and thank you all for listening to this South Shore Scoop.